morning. It is Wednesday, August 10th, 2016. I'm David Grover, and this is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up today on the show, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan meets his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg. China makes covert moves to garner control of the South China Sea. Later in the show, we sum up an exciting day 4 at the Rio Olympics. Good morning. For the first time since Turkish forces shot down a Russian fighter jet last November, the heads of state of the two countries met face-to-face yesterday. And in the wake of the failed military coup in Turkey and hardening relations between Western powers and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, some see the visit as a sign of Ankara's pivot to the east. Let's take a look at the following report by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg with Uri Shapira, and then break it down.
Once fierce rivals, now on the mend. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg, perhaps marking a new stage in ties between the two countries.
Despite a very complicated internal political situation in Turkey, your visit today means that we all want a renewal of our dialogue and restoration of our relations in the interest of the Russian and Turkish peoples.
It is the first meeting between Putin and Erdogan since a bitter feud erupted over Ankara's downing of a Russian warplane 9 months ago. A turning point came after the July 15th coup attempt in Turkey, with Putin being one of the first foreign leaders to offer Erdogan support.
I see this visit as a new beginning, a new page in relations between the two countries. I would like to send my warmest regards to both Vladimir Putin and the Russian people on behalf of myself and Turkish nation.
Putin also refrained from chastising the Turkish president about the ensuing crackdown. Putin has told his counterpart he hopes that Ankara will restore order after the failed coup, following which tens of thousands of people were fired, detained, or arrested.
With us in the studio, we have I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Wakid. Good morning, Ali. And Simon Tsipis, Russia expert and researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies. Good morning to you as well. All right, so let's start with you, Ali. What can we learn about the fact that Erdogan's first meeting outside of Turkey following the coup is with Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, we understand that this is a meeting between two leaders that need one each other, and between two states that need each other. You know that Turkey is in need for a diplomatic maneuver that can overtake its tension with most of the countries of the West at their head, the United States, and Mr. Putin need to overtake the very tough embargo that is imposed on Russia by the United States and the EU. We saw that at the economical and financial level, the two leaders were agreed upon almost everything to retake their relation, and on the contrary, to strengthen the economic relation. Turkey is an important station to the Russian gas to the region, and Russian economy need this development. On the other hand, we saw that on the Syrian crisis, there were no understanding, there were no agreement. The meeting took place when the battle over Aleppo was still taken on the ground, when Russian and Turkish were on the opposite camps. The Russian Air Force was backing the regime, while the rebels were fighting against the Russians and the Syrians, when the Turks accused, of course, the Turkish intelligence to be deeply involved in the logistic and information supply and aid to the rebels. By the way, the chief of the Turkish intelligence service assisted the meeting between Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Putin.
Yeah. Simon, let's hear it from you. How does that work? The fact they clear the air following the fighter jet going down, but on the other hand, they're fighting each other in Syria.
Well, first let's begin from the point that Turkey has much more interest with Russia than with the West. We can start with the economy. Turkey already lost more than 98% of its income from tourism due to Russian sanctions. Then we have the military cooperation, which is really important for Russia due to Dardanelles and Bosphorus roads, which is really important for Russian Black Sea Navy.
Okay.
Then we have two major strategic projects. We have the Turkish stream, the Turецкий поток project, the gas pipeline through the Black Sea, and we have this nuclear reactor Yakuyu. And then we have two more extremely important national security interests between both countries. We have a big national Turkish minority which lives in ex-Soviet republics in Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Crimea, especially Crimea, which became lately a Russian territory. Then what Russia wants, it wants to avoid any unrest in these republics, and Turkey wants these national minorities to be safe there.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have
They sure have a common interest there.
Yes, and then we have the major issue, the deep involvement of Russia in political and military Middle East issues.
Yeah.
Now, Turkey wouldn't want to miss this train because there is now a construction of a new Middle East order, and Turkey would like to take a central part in this new.
And they feel that they're able to take a more central part if they cooperate with Russia, not so much with the West.
And Russia also needs a loyal ally in the area for the future Middle East new order.
Yeah. Ali, back to you. What does it say about relations between Turkey and the U.S.?
Yeah, first of all, the American chief of staff was in Turkey before the departure of Mr. Putin.
But kind of on the down low, you know. You
That's
didn't
true.
see any big headlines.
That's true. But the Turkish take it into consideration before they're celebrating this reconciliation with Russia through this time. There's no secret that the relations between Turkey and the U.S., between President Erdogan and President Obama, are not at their best, and also the criticism that we are hearing from Western leaders via towards the crack that Mr. Erdogan apparently is leading against the opposition, which we did not hear from Mr. Putin, for example, was one of the very first leaders to call Mr. Erdogan and to express his solidarity against the coup.
His reaction was quite different than others. Maybe he liked the idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. But as Mr. Simon said, this meeting allows the two leaders to enlarge their maneuver towards their rivals, but also towards their allies. I don't know if we can speak at this stage about a new alliance between Russia and Turkey. And
he is scheduled to visit Turkey.
Absolutely. And on the other hand, we saw that the day before this summit, Mr. Putin was meeting with two very important leaders, the Iranian one and the Azeri one, which are important issues for the Turkish also. So we saw that at the eve of this summit, every one of the leaders try on one hand to show that we can meet and we can create new understandings, maybe eventually new alliances, but on the other hand, the message toward the other leader is that I have good relations with I can have good relations with the U.S. I'm a key element in NATO, and Putin sent a clear message that in this part of Central Asia, I can be also a key element when I can meet with the Iranians and the Azeris.
When we see Turkey turn to Russia, how does that influence Israel?
Well, I think this cooperation with Turkey is part of a great strategic plan of Russia coming back to Middle East. Now, we see recently that Russia tries to cooperate with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, now with Turkey and also Israel. These are four major Middle East players. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Israel also a part of a great strategic plan of Russia coming back to Middle East.
You think Israel would be wise to play along with that?
I think it would be wise. I think yes.
Yeah. There is a price, though, to pay with the Americans, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a price to pay with the Americans. The Iranian yesterday and the day before yesterday had shoved all the first S-300 that they received from the Russian, which means that the Russians are doing everything in order to send a message to the EU and to the US that they can bypass the embargo that is imposed over Russia, and that they can play with the Western camp. Turkey is a key member of NATO. Saudi Arabia was traditionally part of the Western alliances in the region, and everybody know that the key to solve the Middle East problems, mainly the Syrian crisis, pass through Putin and the Kremlin.
Yeah. Last question. You think NATO's glory days are in the past?
No, I don't think so. You mentioned that Mr. Kerry will be visiting Turkey. Turkey still want to be, on its condition, part of the EU. But we should make the difference between Mr. Erdogan, for example, promised his message that he will be introducing the death penalty into the Turkish law system, while the EU is against this penalty. And we need to see in this power game between Turkey and the EU.
There are a lot of tensions also with the US. We haven't even mentioned Fethullah Gulen, who they are expecting to see expedited from the US.
Absolutely, and very tough words of the Justice Minister of Turkey when he said that the US is threatening and risking its relation with Turkey because of Gulen.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you.
The South China Sea is the site of growing tensions between China, Japan, Indonesia, and other neighboring countries, all staking claims on the waters. With enormous amounts of oil and gas, as well as essential transport routes at stake, it's not hard to see why. Now, despite promises not to militarize the area, China is sending covert military personnel to build human-made islands and create facts on the water, so to speak, to bypass competing claims, even though the potential for tensions to boil over are clear and present. Let's see this report by I-24 News correspondent Denise Wood, and then discuss the matter further.
Since The Hague's ruling in favor of the Philippines over a dispute in the South China Sea on July 12th, the world has closely watched for any signs of aggression by China in the region. While the Asian nation has avoided escalations in armed conflict, it has employed a swarm of irregular maritime militias, dubbed as Little Blue Men, in reference to Russia's deployment of unmarked soldiers known as Little Green Men prior to its invasion of Crimea in 2014, to display its control and expand in the South China Sea. China's civilian militia activity has already spread to waters claimed by Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, causing panic in the region. On August 6th, the Chinese government sent close to 250 vessels to the traditionally Japanese-held Senkaku Islands, including 13 Coast Guard ships and around 230 fishing boats.
The criticism that China is escalating the situation is off the mark. I want you to understand that Chinese government ships are making efforts to guide the increasing number of fishing boats in the waters in order to prevent the situation from becoming more complicated.
While attention has turned to China's activity since July's legal ruling, the Pentagon released a report regarding the country's stealth expansion months before, claiming China had already retaken 3,200 acres of land and used much of it to construct military facilities. As countries like the Philippines are conducting diplomatic visits to strengthen ties with China, Western officials claim Vietnam has placed new mobile rocket launchers on several of its islands, capable of striking Chinese runways and installations in the area. While China's expansion in the region has so far proved effective, these moves raise the question of how long it can remain bloodless.